The morning rain drummed against the windows of Ruby's diner as Victoria Whitmore pulled her designer coat tighter around her shoulders. She chose the corner booth deliberately, hoping the worn vinyl seats and chipped formica table would somehow make her invisible. Behind oversized sunglasses, she watched the early crowd of construction workers and shop owners, their conversations a comforting murmur that didn't include her name. The bell above the door chimed, and a man stumbled in, his dark hair dripping wet, his white shirt clinging to broad shoulders. He paused, scanning the crowded diner with the careful eyes of someone accustomed to assessing situations quickly. "Anywhere's fine." "Honey," Ruby called from behind the counter, her weathered hands never pausing as she poured coffee. "Except that corner booth's taken by our regular." Victoria's cheeks burned, regular, as if sitting alone in a diner every morning for 3 weeks made her belong anywhere. The stranger approached her table, water pooling at his feet. "Mind if I sit? Everywhere else is full, and my car just died outside in your lovely Connecticut weather." His voice carried a hint of humor despite his obvious frustration. Victoria found herself nodding before she could think better of it. When was the last time someone had asked her permission for anything instead of simply taking what they wanted? "Michael Sullivan," he said, extending a damp hand as he slid into the opposite seat. "And before you ask, yes, I'm new here. Moved to Millbrook Valley exactly 4 days ago, and I'm already questioning my life choices." Victoria almost smiled. Almost. "Victoria," she replied quietly. Not offering her last name, Ruby appeared with coffee and her knowing look. "You picked the right booth, stranger. Victoria here makes the best conversation in town when she's in the mood." "Ruby," Victoria warned softly. But the older woman was already walking away. Humming, Michael pulled off his jacket, and as he did, something metallic clattered onto the table between them. A detective's badge, Hartford Police Department, caught the diner's fluorescent light. Victoria's breath hitched as she noticed the jagged scar running along his forearm, white against his tan skin. Michael's hand shot out to cover the badge, but it was too late. Their eyes met across the small table, and Victoria saw something flicker in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, or calculation. "You're police," she said, her voice barely audible above the diner's chatter. "Was police," Michael corrected, slipping the badge into his pocket. "Starting a security consulting business now. Sometimes it's better to help people outside the system." Before Victoria could respond, the bell chimed again, and the diner's warm atmosphere shifted like a cloud passing over the sun. Edna Whitmore entered with military precision, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the rain. Her sharp eyes immediately finding Victoria's corner booth. "Victoria." "Darling," Eleanor's voice could have cut glass.
"How?"
"Unexpected to find you here." Victoria straightened, the familiar weight of judgment settling on her shoulders. "Eleanor." "Good morning." The older woman's gaze shifted to Michael with undisguised disapproval. "And you are?" Michael stood, extending his hand with easy confidence. "Michael Sullivan. Pleased to meet you." "Eleanor Whitmore," she replied coolly, not taking his hand. "Victoria's mother-in-law. Though I suppose former mother-in-law would be more accurate now." Victoria's coffee cup rattled against the saucer as she set it down. The entire diner had gone quiet, every ear tuned to their conversation. "Michael's new in town," Victoria said quickly. "His car broke down." "How convenient," Eleanor's companion, Margaret Henley, whispered loudly enough for half the diner to hear. "Strangers always seem to find our Victoria, don't they?" Eleanor's lips curved in what might have been a smile on anyone else. "Victoria, I trust you remember our conversation about next week's board meeting. Some decisions once made can't be undone. The company's future depends on stability." The warning hung in the air like smoke. Victoria felt 20 pairs of eyes watching, waiting for her response. For any sign of the weakness they all expected to see. "Of course," Victoria managed. Eleanor gathered her silk scarf with theatrical precision. "Enjoy your breakfast, dear. Both of you." As the door closed behind the 3 women, conversation slowly resumed, but Victoria could feel the lingering stares, the whispered speculations about the wealthy widow and her mysterious breakfast companion. "Friend of yours?" Michael asked gently. Victoria almost laughed, but the sound caught in her throat. "Something like that." 3 days later, Victoria found herself walking the familiar path through Millbrook Valley Park, telling herself she wasn't hoping to see Michael again. The evening light filtered through the oak trees, casting long shadows across the well-worn trail that circled the small pond. "Funny how we keep running into each other," a voice said behind her. She turned to find Michael approaching, his hands in his pockets, his expression carefully neutral. "Small town," she replied, but her heart was beating faster than her leisurely pace warranted. They fell into step together, walking toward the bench that overlooked the valley. The silence between them felt different from the awkwardness at the diner, more comfortable, as if they were old friends rather than strangers who'd shared one interrupted breakfast. "Can I ask you something?" Michael said as they sat down. "What did your mother-in-law mean about decisions that can't be undone?" Victoria stared across the valley at the sprawling estate that had been her prison for 5 years. "My husband died 8 months ago. Heart attack. Since then, everyone seems to have opinions about what I should do, how I should grieve, who I should trust. And what do you want to do?" The simple question hit her like a physical blow. When was the last time anyone had asked what she wanted? "I want to disappear," she whispered. "Start over somewhere no one knows my name, or my bank account balance, or how many months I'm supposed to mourn." "What's stopping you?" Victoria's phone buzzed insistently in her purse. She ignored it until it buzzed again, then again. Finally, she pulled it out, her face draining of color as she read the stream of messages. "Emergency board meeting. Tomorrow. 2 p.m. Your presence required. Eleanor. We need to discuss your recent behavior. Dear Harrison Webb, urgent matters regarding company leadership require immediate attention. Board member after board member, each message more ominous than the last. Victoria stood abruptly, her hands shaking. "I have to go." "They're calling an emergency meeting. Someone's been watching me, reporting back. They think I'm unfit to run Charles's company." Victoria, "No, you don't understand." She was backing away now, fear replacing the tentative peace she'd felt moments before. "They're looking for any excuse to take everything away from me. And now they have one." The next afternoon, Victoria sat at the head of the polished conference table in Whitmore Industries' boardroom, facing 12 pairs of hostile eyes. Eleanor presided from the opposite end like a queen holding court, her satisfaction barely concealed behind a mask of concern. "These are difficult times," Harrison Webb began, his voice oozing false sympathy. The family lawyer had been Charles's friend once, but grief and power had a way of revealing people's true nature. "Grief affects us all differently, and we understand Victoria has been struggling." "Struggling how, exactly?" Victoria kept her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. Margaret Henley leaned forward eagerly. "Well, dear, there's the matter of your public behavior. Frequenting diners, associating with strangers, making decisions without consulting the board." "I had breakfast in a public restaurant," Victoria said. "I wasn't aware that required board approval." Eleanor's voice cut through the murmurs like a blade. "It does when that stranger is a former police detective with a questionable past who conveniently appeared in our town just as you began acting erratically." The room went silent. Victoria felt the walls closing in, the familiar sensation of being trapped that had haunted her since Charles's death. "We've had him investigated," Eleanor continued, sliding a manila folder across the table. "Your new friend isn't who he claims to be. Detective Michael Sullivan was forced to resign from the Hartford Police Department after his partner died during a botched investigation into corporate fraud, a case remarkably similar to certain irregularities that have recently come to light in our own company." Victoria's hands trembled as she opened the folder. Photos of Michael, official documents, witness statements, all painting him as a disgraced cop, desperate enough to target a grieving widow for her fortune. "Motion on the table," Harrison announced with practiced efficiency. "To remove Victoria Whitmore as CEO and chairman of Whitmore Industries, citing concerns about her mental stability and judgment during her grief period. "Seconded," came Margaret's voice. Victoria stared at the damning evidence before her, feeling everything she thought she knew crumbling around her. Michael's kindness, his easy conversation, the way he'd made her feel human again after months of being treated like a fragile artifact. Had it all been a performance? All in favor? Eleanor's voice echoed in the suddenly cavernous room. Hands rose around the table like grave markers. Victoria counted them with growing horror. 8, 9, 10, more than enough. Motion carries, Harrison declared. "Victoria, you have 48 hours to transition all executive responsibilities. We'll be reviewing all company accounts and recent transactions for irregularities." As the board members filed out, their whispered conversations already turning to the division of power, Eleanor approached Victoria's chair. "Don't look so devastated, dear," she said softly. "Charles left you well provided for. You can live quite comfortably without the burden of running his company. Perhaps it's time to focus on finding a more suitable social circle." Victoria sat alone in the empty boardroom long after the last footstep faded, staring at Michael's file. The man she'd begun to trust, the first person in months who'd made her feel something other than grief and isolation, was apparently just another predator circling her fortune. But as she read through the documents, a small detail caught her attention. The case that had cost Michael his career and his partner's life involved a company called Patterson Industries. The name stirred something in her memory, something connected to Charles's final months. Her phone rang, Michael's name appearing on the screen. Victoria stared at it for 3 rings before answering. "Hello, Michael." Her voice was ice. "Victoria, we need to talk. I know what happened at the meeting today." "Do you? How convenient. Almost like you were expecting it." A pause. "Someone's been feeding them information about us, about me. They want you isolated and vulnerable. Or maybe they were right about you." The words tasted like ashes. "Maybe I was just another mark to you." "Victoria, listen to me. Your husband—" "Don't!" She stood, gathering the damning file. "Don't you dare bring Charles into this. He's the only person who ever loved me for something other than my money, and he's gone. I won't let you use his memory to manipulate me." "Check his files," Michael said urgently. "From 2 years ago. The Patterson account. You're in more danger than you realize." The line went dead. Victoria stared at her phone, Michael's final words echoing in the empty boardroom. Patterson. There it was again. That name that stirred uncomfortable memories of late-night phone calls and Charles's increasing anxiety in the months before his death. Maybe it was time to find out what her husband had been hiding. Victoria's hands shook as she unlocked the heavy oak door of her estate that evening. The mansion felt different now, oppressive in its silence, every shadow seeming to hide watching eyes. She climbed the curved staircase to Charles's private study, a room she'd avoided since his death 8 months ago. The leather-bound ledgers and filing cabinets stood like silent sentinels around the mahogany desk where her husband had spent his final nights, working late into the darkness with a desperation she hadn't understood then. Now, as she pulled out the drawer marked P, her fingers trembling with each file folder, she began to piece together the puzzle Charles had died trying to solve. Patterson Industries. There it was, a thick folder filled with bank statements, correspondence and handwritten notes in Charles's familiar script. The deeper she read, the more her blood chilled. Patterson had been a shell company, funneling money from Whitmore Industries through a complex web of transactions that led nowhere. But Charles had been tracking every payment, every false invoice, every doctored receipt. "Trust no one in the family business," read one note dated just 2 weeks before his death. "If something happens to me, contact Detective Michael Sullivan, Hartford PD. He's investigating similar patterns." "He can be trusted," Victoria's breath caught. Michael hadn't been lying. Charles had reached out to him, had been working with him to uncover the truth. But then why hadn't Michael told her? Why the secrecy? Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging, Victoria. Some graves are better left undisturbed." The lights went out. Victoria fumbled for her phone's flashlight, her heart hammering against her ribs. The house's security system should have kept the power stable. should have alerted her to any issues. As she made her way toward the main electrical panel in the basement, every creak of the old house's settling beams sounded like footsteps. The basement door stood open, though she was certain she'd locked it that morning. Cold air rushed up from the darkness below, carrying the scent of rain and something else, cologne. Someone had been in her house. Looking for something, Victoria? She spun around to find Harrison Webb emerging from the shadows of the main hallway, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled, his eyes holding a hardness she'd never seen before. Harrison, how did you get in here? Charles gave me a key years ago. For emergencies. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'd say this qualifies. Behind him, Eleanor appeared, her silver hair gleaming in the dim light from Victoria's phone. We tried to do this the easy way, dear. The board meeting, the gentle transition of power. But you just couldn't leave well enough alone. Victoria backed toward the study, her mind racing. You're the ones embezzling from the company. Charles found out, didn't he? Your husband was always too clever for his own good, Eleanor said with cold satisfaction. Asking questions, hiring outside investigators, threatening to expose what he called irregularities. He never understood that some money is meant to flow where it's needed most. You killed him. The words came out as a whisper, but they echoed in the vast hallway like a scream. Harrison pulled something from his jacket pocket, a small vial filled with clear liquid. Charles died of a heart attack, Victoria. Very sudden, very tragic. The coroner found nothing suspicious because there was nothing to find. This particular substance mimics natural cardiac failure perfectly. The same substance that's going to cause your tragic suicide tonight, Eleanor added matter-of-factly. Grief-stricken widow, overwhelmed by the loss of her husband's company, unable to face the shame of her poor judgment. The town will understand completely. Victoria's hand closed around the letter opener on Charles's desk. People will ask questions. Detective Sullivan will be found dead in his motel room tomorrow. Harrison interrupted. Another tragic suicide. Disgraced cop, failed business venture, couldn't handle starting over. These things happen. The casual way they discussed murder made Victoria's stomach lurch. These people had sat at her dinner table, had comforted her at Charles's funeral, had pretended to care about her well-being while planning her death. The beauty of it, Eleanor continued, is that everyone will believe it. Poor Victoria never recovered from her husband's death, made increasingly erratic decisions, trusted the wrong people. The board will run the company much more efficiently without all of Charles's tedious oversight. Harrison approached slowly, the vial catching the light. It won't hurt, Victoria. Much more humane than Charles received, actually. He fought quite hard at the end. Victoria's finger found the silent alarm button Charles had installed beneath his desk, a precaution she'd thought paranoid at the time. She pressed it, hoping against hope that someone would respond, that Michael's warnings had been heeded by someone. Somewhere, you won't get away with this, she said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Too many people know about the Patterson connection now. Eleanor laughed, the sound like breaking glass. Who's going to tell them? You'll be dead. Sullivan will be dead. And Charles's files will unfortunately be destroyed in the electrical fire that causes tonight's tragic accident. Harrison lunged forward with the syringe, just as the front door exploded inward. Michael burst through, his police training evident in every calculated movement as he tackled Harrison to the ground. The vial shattered against the marble floor, its contents hissing as they ate into the stone. Victoria, are you hurt? Michael called out, wrestling Harrison's arms behind his back. Eleanor had produced a gun from her purse, her hands remarkably steady for a woman in her 70s. How touching. The disgraced detective arrives just in time to die with his lover. Put the gun down, Eleanor, came a voice from the doorway. Detective Sarah Chen of the Connecticut State Police stepped into view, her weapon drawn and trained on Eleanor. We've been listening to your entire confession. Listening? Eleanor's composure cracked for the first time. Michael pulled a small recording device from his pocket. Victoria's silent alarm wasn't the only thing Charles installed. He had this whole house wired for audio surveillance after he started suspecting you. Every word you just said was transmitted directly to Detective Chen's team. More officers flooded into the house, their boots echoing through the halls that had seemed so empty and threatening moments before. As Harrison was cuffed and read his rights, he turned to Victoria with undisguised hatred. "You have no idea what you've done," he snarled. "The company is finished. The scandal will destroy everything Charles built. Every employee will lose their job because you couldn't leave things alone." Eleanor, now in handcuffs herself, managed one final cruel smile. "Charles died for nothing, Victoria, and so will his precious company." As the police led them away, their threats and accusations echoing through the mansion, Victoria sank into Charles's leather chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just been revealed. Her husband hadn't died of natural causes. The people she'd trusted most had murdered him in cold blood, and would have done the same to her without hesitation. Michael approached carefully, his face etched with concern. "Victoria, are you okay?" She looked up at him. This man she'd doubted just hours before, who had risked his life to save hers, despite her accusations and mistrust. "You were working with Charles all along." "He contacted me 3 months before he died," Michael confirmed. "Said he'd uncovered evidence of embezzlement but didn't know who to trust within the company. We were building a case together when he paused, his jaw tightening. "When they killed him. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wasn't sure you weren't involved. Rich spouse, convenient heart attack, sole beneficiary of a massive estate. It looked suspicious. I came to Millbrook Valley to investigate you, Victoria." "I'm sorry." The honesty in his voice cut deeper than any lie could have. "And now? Now I know you're as much a victim as Charles was. Maybe more so, because you've had to live with the grief they caused while they pretended to comfort you." Detective Chen reappeared in the doorway, her expression grim. "Ms. Whitmore, I need to ask you some questions about your husband's final weeks, and about the company's financial records. This investigation is far from over." As Victoria nodded numbly, the weight of everything that lay ahead settled on her shoulders. The police investigation, the media attention, the task of rebuilding a company corrupted from within. It seemed insurmountable. But for the first time since Charles's death, she wasn't facing it alone. Michael stood beside her chair, not touching but present, solid and real in a world that had revealed itself to be built on lies. "Whatever happens next," he said quietly, "you don't have to handle it by yourself." Outside, sirens wailed as more police cars arrived to process the crime scene. The Whitmore estate, which had been Victoria's prison for so many months, was about to become the center of the biggest scandal in Millbrook Valley's history. But as Victoria looked around Charles's study, seeing it clearly for the first time since his death, she realized something had fundamentally changed. The shadows no longer seemed threatening. The silence no longer felt oppressive. For the first time in 8 months, Victoria Whitmore was no longer afraid of the truth. 1 month later, Victoria stood before the emergency assembly of Whitmore Industries employees in the company's main conference hall. 200 worried faces stared back at her, their jobs hanging in the balance as news of the embezzlement scandal dominated headlines across Connecticut. The company's stock had plummeted, major contracts had been cancelled, and creditors were circling like vultures. "I know you're scared," Victoria began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to announce. "I know you've heard the rumors, read the articles calling our company corrupt, our leadership criminal. Some of those things are true." A murmur rippled through the crowd. In the back of the room, she spotted Michael, his presence a comfort even now when everything seemed to be falling apart. "But here's what the newspapers won't tell you," she continued. "My husband Charles died trying to protect this company and every person in this room. He discovered the theft and fought to stop it, even when it cost him his life. Today, I'm announcing that Whitmore Industries will be restructured as the Charles Whitmore Foundation for Ethical Business Practices." The murmur grew louder. Uncertainty mixing with hope in equal measure. Every employee will keep their job. Every pension will be protected, and we will spend whatever it takes to make right what was stolen. Not just from the company, but from the community that trusted us." Victoria paused, looking out at faces that had watched her stumble through months of grief and isolation. "My husband believed that business should serve people, not the other way around. It's time we proved him right." The applause started slowly, uncertain, then built to a roar that shook the windows. As Victoria stepped down from the podium, she felt something she hadn't experienced since Charles's death: purpose. Outside the conference hall, Michael waited with Detective Chen and a stack of legal documents that needed Victoria's signature. The prosecutors are confident. They have enough evidence to convict. "Eleanor and Harrison," Detective Chen reported. "Their assets are being frozen to help recover the stolen funds, and 3 other shell companies have been identified in the investigation." Victoria signed each document methodically, her name authorizing the dismantling of a criminal enterprise that had operated under her nose for years. "How much did they steal in total?" "Approximately $12 million over 4 years, Detective Chen replied. "But with the foundation structure you're implementing, the company should recover within 18 months. After Detective Chen left, Victoria and Michael walked across the parking lot toward their cars. The autumn air carried the scent of burning leaves and the promise of winter, but for the first time in months, the changing season felt like renewal rather than ending. "You didn't have to do this," Michael said quietly. "The foundation, protecting everyone's jobs. You could have sold the company and walked away from all of it. Charles would never have forgiven me if I'd let his life's work die because of Eleanor's greed," Victoria replied. "Besides, I'm tired of running from responsibility. Tired of letting other people make decisions about my life." They reached Victoria's car, but neither made a move to leave. The parking lot was nearly empty now, the employees having returned to work with renewed hope and purpose. "I've been thinking," Michael said, his hands in his pockets, suddenly looking uncertain, "about my security consulting business. About staying in Millbrook Valley." Victoria's heart skipped, but she kept her expression neutral. And I realized I don't want to be here just for the business." He turned to face her fully, his eyes serious. "I want to be here for you, Victoria, if you'll have me." Before she could respond, her phone rang with an urgent tone. Victoria glanced at the screen and felt her blood turn to ice. It was Detective Chen, calling less than 10 minutes after she'd left. "Detective." "What's wrong?" "Victoria, Eleanor Webb posted bail an hour ago. We just discovered that Harrison had a second set of books hidden in a safety deposit box in Hartford. The embezzlement goes back nearly 8 years, and the amount stolen is closer to $30 million. We're issuing a warrant for Eleanor's immediate arrest, but she's disappeared." Victoria's hand tightened on the phone. "Disappeared how?" "Her house is empty, her car is gone, and her bank accounts were cleaned out this morning. Victoria, I need you to be very careful. People who steal that much money don't just give up when they're caught." The line went dead. Victoria stared at her phone, the Foundation's victory suddenly feeling hollow and premature. "What is it?" Michael asked, his voice tense. "Eleanor's gone, and they think she took even more money than we knew about." Victoria looked up at the Whitmore Industries building, its windows reflecting the late afternoon sun. "She's not finished with us, Michael. People like Eleanor don't accept defeat." As if summoned by her words, Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You took everything from me, dear. Now I'll return the favor. Charles thought he was so clever, but he never found all my hiding places. Neither will you." Michael read the message over her shoulder, his jaw tightening. "We need to call Detective Chen back. Get you protection." "No," Victoria said firmly. "I'm done being afraid of Eleanor Webb. She's already taken 8 months of my life, and she stole years from Charles before she killed him. I won't let her terrorize me anymore. Victoria, be reasonable. She's desperate now, and desperate people are dangerous." "So am I," Victoria replied, surprised by the steel in her own voice. "I have something she doesn't, the truth, and people willing to fight for it." That evening, Victoria sat in Charles's study, now her study, going through every file cabinet and document box with methodical precision. If Eleanor had hidden evidence of additional theft, Victoria was determined to find it. Michael had insisted on staying, stationing himself in the main hallway where he could watch both the front entrance and the stairs. Around midnight, Victoria's persistence paid off. Hidden behind a false back in Charles's filing cabinet, she found a manila envelope marked "Insurance Policy" in his handwriting. Inside were photographs of Eleanor meeting with representatives from 3 different companies, copies of forged contracts, and a detailed timeline of the embezzlement scheme going back nearly a decade. But the most damning evidence was a recorded conversation between Eleanor and Harrison, discussing plans to accelerate Charles's timeline if he got too close to the truth. Victoria's hands shook as she listened to her mother-in-law casually discussing her husband's murder as if it were a business transaction. "Michael," she called out, her voice echoing through the house. "You need to see this." Silence. "Michael?" Victoria stood, Charles's evidence clutched in her hands. The house felt wrong somehow, too quiet, too still. She found him unconscious in the hallway, a small dart protruding from his neck. Standing over him, dressed in black and holding what appeared to be a tranquilizer gun, was Eleanor Webb. "Hello, dear," Eleanor said pleasantly, as if they were meeting for afternoon tea. "I hope you found Charles's little insurance policy entertaining. He was always so dramatic about everything." Victoria backed toward the study, her mind racing. "The police are looking for you." "You can't possibly think you'll get away with this." "Oh, but I already have," Eleanor smiled. "You see, while you've been playing detective, I've been liquidating assets in countries that don't have extradition treaties with the United States. $30 million buys a very comfortable retirement in certain parts of the world. Then why come back? Why risk everything for revenge?" Eleanor's pleasant mask slipped, revealing the cold fury beneath. "Because you destroyed my life's work, Victoria. 40 years of careful planning, of building the perfect cover, of positioning myself to control one of Connecticut's most successful companies. Charles was supposed to die quietly. The company was supposed to pass to more manageable hands, and you were supposed to fade away into irrelevant widowhood." She raised the tranquilizer gun, aiming it at Victoria's chest. "But you just couldn't leave well enough alone. You had to play the grieving detective, had to bring in outside help, had to ruin everything I'd built." Victoria felt the edge of Charles's desk against her back. There was nowhere left to retreat. "You killed him for money. Your own son-in-law for money." "I killed him for power," Eleanor corrected. "Money was just the means. Charles never understood that some people are born to lead and others are born to follow. He thought ethics and principles mattered more than results." "They do matter," Victoria said firmly. "They matter to Charles. They matter to the people who work for his company, and they matter to me." Eleanor laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. "Pretty words, dear. But they won't save you from joining your husband." As Eleanor's finger tightened on the trigger, Victoria heard the distant sound of sirens growing closer. Michael must have triggered some kind of alarm before Eleanor found him. Hope flickered in her chest. "Do you hear that, Eleanor? It's over. You've lost." "Perhaps," Eleanor conceded, "but if I'm going down, I'm taking you with me." The dart gun fired just as the study door exploded inward. Victoria threw herself behind Charles's desk as Detective Chen and a team of officers swarmed into the room. Eleanor tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. This time, when the handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists, it was final. As paramedics checked on Michael, who was already beginning to stir from the tranquilizer, Victoria emerged from behind the desk with Charles's evidence folder clutched in her hands. "Detective Chen," she said, her voice steady despite everything she'd been through, "I think this should be enough to put Eleanor away for the rest of her life." Detective Chen took the folder, her expression grim as she flipped through the photographs and documents. "This is exactly what we needed for the federal charges. She'll never see freedom again." Eleanor, now in custody and facing the end of her carefully constructed world, turned for one last look at Victoria. "You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've inherited. Charles's company, his secrets, his enemies, they're all yours now, dear. Enjoy them. As the police led Eleanor away for the final time, Victoria sank into Charles's chair, exhausted but finally truly free. Michael appeared in the doorway, still unsteady from the tranquilizer, but alive and whole. "Is it over?" he asked. Victoria looked around the study where so much pain and revelation had taken place, then at the man who had risked everything to help her find the truth. "Yes," she said simply. "It's over." Outside, dawn was breaking over Millbrook Valley, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. For the first time since Charles's death, Victoria felt ready to face whatever came next. Thank you for listening to this story until the end. If you enjoyed it, please support the channel, subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments so you don't miss the next episodes. See you in the next story.